When a single cryptic note shattered her quiet life, she didn't know it would lead to buried secrets, deadly betrayals, and a truth so explosive it would tear apart everything she thought she knew, until the only choice left was to survive or join the dead. My name is Casey Monroe, and everything I ever worked for began in a cramped one-bedroom apartment where the stove only worked when it wanted to, the faucet dripped day and night like a ticking clock, and textbooks were stacked higher than the furniture. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors fight about rent through the peeling paint, and every night I fell asleep to the hum of the old refrigerator that never quite shut right. I was the first in my family to attend college, the first to believe that the horizon was something you could walk toward instead of stare at from a distance. That belief came at a cost. I was drowning in student loans so deep they felt like they would outlive me. I juggled shifts at a coffee shop where the air smelled perpetually of burnt espresso and disinfectant. On my off hours, I tutored rich kids in chemistry and physics, kids who had personal drivers waiting outside to take them to fencing practice or violin lessons. I tried to smile through their complaints about their boarding school food, while my own dinner was often just instant noodles eaten over my laptop. Every other breath was a plea to my body not to give up. My hands were raw from carrying trays, my back ached from standing hours without rest, and my eyes burned from staring at code and diagrams until 2 or 3 in the morning. But I held on because my final thesis was due in 3 days, and that thesis was my lifeline. It was my ticket out. It was the culmination of 5 years of sacrifice, long nights, skipped meals, and a determination that had to be stronger than my circumstances. I lived with my parents because there was no way I could afford rent on my own. They made sure I never forgot it. Every morning felt like waking into a reminder of my place in their hierarchy. You are 24, still here, still sponging off us like a parasite. My father's voice carried from the living room, usually shirtless, the stale smell of beer on his breath as he tossed empty cans at the wall behind me. "Do not worry, Daddy," my sister Savannah would chime in with a tone sweet enough to rot teeth. Once Casey fails that little essay of hers, maybe she will finally learn to clean floors like the rest of us. Savannah had been the family's golden child, despite her failures. She had dropped out of high school twice, gotten pregnant at 17, and every time she hit rock bottom, my parents rolled out the red carpet for her return. She got a used car when she came back home. I got a bus pass. She had a baby shower where every relative came to celebrate. I got told I was selfish for not giving them grandchildren. The closer I got to graduation, the thicker the resentment in the house became. It was like smoke, invisible at times, but always there, clinging to my skin and making it hard to breathe. I could feel their eyes on me whenever I worked on my project, as if my success would be a direct insult to the way they had chosen to live. I had been guarding my laptop like it was a newborn. It contained 5 years of notes, diagrams, 3D renderings, and countless late-night brainstorms. My thesis was a project I believed in with every cell in my body. It was a design for prosthetic spinal columns made for rural communities without surgical access. It was meant to be affordable, durable, and transformative for people who otherwise had no hope of walking again. My advisor, Dr. Ellis, had said it could change lives. But none of that mattered in my family's kitchen. "You think you're better than us, Hut," Dad said one night, leaning against the counter with a grease-stained shirt. "Walking around with your fancy words and typing like you were about to invent the cure to broke." He reached toward my laptop where it was charging on the table. I stepped between him and it. "Lay off. I'm almost done." His hand shot out. It was not a slap. It was a shove hard enough to send me crashing into the cabinet. My shoulder throbbed where it hit the wood. Savannah laughed from the doorway, her phone held up like she was recording a comedy skit. "Daddy, maybe she should use a notebook like in the old days," she sneered. "Trash should not be allowed tech." "I should have tossed her when she was born," Dad muttered. Never cried, just stared like a little leech sucking the life out of everyone in the room. I stood up, gathered my laptop into my arms, and turned away. 3 more days, I whispered to myself. Just 3 more days. The next evening, I came home from my shift with my stomach growling and my wrists aching from a day of pouring lattes. The house was dark except for a dim light in the living room. There was a strange stillness to the air. Savannah sat on the couch, her expression smug. Dad stood behind her. My gaze dropped to the floor. My laptop lay shattered, the screen cracked in jagged lines, the lid dented, the hard drive dangling loose like a broken tooth. I dropped to my knees, the sound of my pulse loud in my ears. "I told you," Dad said calmly. "This house does not serve leeches, and leeches do not get futures." "Why?" I asked, my voice small. "Because you got cocky," he said with a smirk. "Thought you could fly above this family. Guess what? We keep our own on the ground." Savannah leaned forward, her grin wide. "Oops, looks like Miss Perfect has nothing to submit now. Should have saved it to the cloud, genius." I did not scream or cry. I just sat there, listening to my own breath. There were only two options: break or build something stronger from the ashes. But not yet. I picked up what was left of my laptop, my arms trembling. Savannah shifted uncomfortably under my silence. "Oh, come on, do not go mute on us now," she said. "Do not be a drama queen. You are not even bleeding." That was when I smiled, because I knew something she did not. My project no longer lived solely in that laptop. It was in my head, in my muscle memory, in every sleepless night burned into my brain. I could rebuild it, and I would not just rebuild the project. I would rebuild everything. I left the house the next morning without speaking to anyone. It was not because I was afraid, but because I needed my silence. Silence was armor. Silence was a space where plans could grow. They thought I would crumble, that I would beg for an extension or cry to my professors. They thought I would spiral like Savannah used to when she did not get picked for cheerleading tryouts. Instead, I walked straight to the university's biomedical engineering building. The campus was still half asleep, the winter air sharp enough to sting my cheeks. My hands ached from clutching the broken pieces of my laptop inside my bag. But I had more than they knew. I had fragments of my work stored in the university's simulation drive. Not the final draft, but enough to resurrect something that might even be better than the original. Dr. Ellis was already in her office when I arrived. Her desk was buried under research papers, lab reports, and half-empty coffee mugs. She looked up, and I saw her expression change when she noticed the bruise near my temple, where the corner of the shattered laptop had struck me. "Casey, what happened?" she asked, her voice tight. I shook my head. "I just need full lab access for the next 3 days." Her gaze lingered on me like she wanted to press for answers, but she finally nodded. "You have 72 hours. Use them well." That was all I needed. For the next 2 days, the lab became my world. I barely left except to grab vending machine snacks or refill my coffee. My phone stayed off. I poured every ounce of energy into rebuilding the design, revisiting every calculation from memory, sketching diagrams until my fingers cramped. I even managed to improve the model, swapping certain materials for lighter, cheaper alternatives without sacrificing durability. It was on the second night, around midnight, when I noticed someone else working in the far corner of the lab. Tall, broad-shouldered, with messy dark hair that looked like he had run his hands through it 100 times. His name was Adrian Wolf, a mechanical engineering grad student known for his unshakable focus and a portfolio of robotics designs that had already caught the attention of tech investors. I had met him once during a group seminar, but we had barely spoken. That night, he walked over holding a steaming paper cup. "Thought you could use this," he said, setting it beside me. It smelled like real coffee, not the burnt lab stuff. "Thanks," I said, wary but grateful. "You have been in here almost nonstop. What are you working on?" I hesitated. People at the university could be competitive, sometimes ruthless, but something in his tone was genuine. "My thesis. The original got destroyed, so I am rebuilding from scratch." He frowned. "That is brutal. Do you need an extra pair of hands?" I almost said no, but the truth was that help could make the difference between barely finishing and producing something remarkable. I slid my notes toward him, and his eyebrows lifted as he scanned the designs. "This is brilliant." We worked together until 3 in the morning, our conversations minimal but productive. He handled some of the CAD modeling while I focused on the biomedical integration. By the time he left, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and something else, an awareness that maybe not everyone wanted to see me fail. The third day came faster than I wanted. My hands were numb from hours of modeling and coding, my eyes sore, my back stiff. But when I hit the final save, the new prototype was better than the one that had been smashed. I submitted it to the review board and slumped under the desk for a 6-hour nap. When I woke, my phone showed 24 missed calls. Most from Savannah, 2 from Dad. I ignored them all. Instead, I checked my email. The thesis defense schedule had been posted. Mine was set for the final slot of the next day. Adrian caught up with me outside the lab. Nervous, he asked. Not exactly, I said. I am more ready than I have ever been. Presentation day felt like walking into a different life. The lecture hall was filled with professors, industry experts, and students in press suits. I wore a black sweater with frayed cuffs and scuffed shoes. When my name was called, I stepped to the podium and felt every pair of eyes on me. I began with the problem. I talked about rural communities where spinal injuries meant permanent disability because advanced surgical options were out of reach. I explained the structure, the adjustable hinges, the lightweight polymer blend. I showed animations of movement range, durability tests, and even a stress simulation Adrian had helped me perfect. Then I ended with something personal. A hand-drawn image I had created at 2 in the morning in my motel room, digitized into the final slide. It showed a little girl in a hospital gown, standing upright with a brace down her back. The figure was simple, almost childlike, but it spoke more than my data ever could. The room was silent. Then the applause began, growing into something thunderous. When the scores were posted, I did not just pass. I won the Dean's Thesis honor. My name went onto the Research Fellowship Board. I was offered immediate interviews with medical tech firms. I did not go home. Not yet. Instead, I checked into a small downtown motel. It had peeling wallpaper and a noisy ice machine, but it was mine. I ordered greasy takeout and stared at the city lights. I had done it. What I did not know was that this victory was only the first move in a much longer game, and that someone, not my father, not Savannah, had been watching me closely from the moment I stepped onto that stage. The next morning, the soft amber light that filtered through my apartment blinds felt like a cruel lie. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I had expected to wake up with a sense of relief after last night's near miss at the cafe, but instead, unease coiled in my stomach like a snake. My phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. You're not safe. Trust no one. I stared at it, reading it twice, then a third time. The words were chilling not because of what they said, but because they mirrored something Daniel had whispered under his breath in the chaos last night. Something I had brushed off as paranoia. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. 3 firm raps. I checked the peephole and froze. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Mrs. Hanley from next door with her usual morning complaints about my music. It was a woman in her mid-30s, sharp bob haircut, black leather jacket, and eyes so calculating they seemed to strip the paint from my walls. I opened the door a crack. Can I help you? She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. I think you already know why I'm here. I'm sorry Save it, she cut in. You were with Daniel last night. That makes you my problem. I tightened my grip on the doorframe. And you are? She slipped a small badge from her jacket and flashed it briefly. Too quickly for me to read the name, but I caught the letters SIA embossed in gold. Call me Claire, she said, and I suggest you let me in before your neighbors hear things they shouldn't. Something about the way she said shouldn't made my chest tighten. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Inside, Claire paced like a predator confined to a small cage. I need to know exactly what Daniel told you, she said. Every word, every detail. I don't. Don't lie to me, she snapped, her voice a whip crack. Last night wasn't a coincidence. He's been under surveillance for months. And if you think you just ran into him at that cafe, you're already in more danger than you can imagine. Her words hit like a punch. So what? You're saying someone set me up? She stopped pacing, eyes locking on mine. Not someone. Him. Before I could respond, a sudden pounding shook the door. Claire's head jerked toward it. Her hand went to her jacket, definitely not for a pen. Stay quiet, she hissed. The pounding stopped. A shadow passed over the frosted glass. Then silence. Claire moved to the window and glanced out. Her jaw tightened. They found us faster than I thought. They? Who's they? She turned to me, her voice low and urgent. You've got less than an hour before your life, as you know it is over. Pack what you can carry and leave your phone here. I blinked. Wait. She didn't wait. She was already pulling a small, silver object from her pocket, something that looked halfway between a USB stick and a scalpel. She slid across my table. Daniel trusted you with something last night, even if you didn't realize it. That, she nodded at the object, is why you're still breathing. Before I could speak, my phone buzzed again. A new text from Daniel. If you're reading this, don't trust Claire. The downpour thickened, hammering against the cabin roof, each drop sounding like an impatient knock. Anna kept her gaze fixed on a rain-streaked window, but her thoughts were spiraling around what she'd just overheard. Words like wrong deal and they're watching tangled in her mind, scraping against every logical explanation. She finally turned to David. Who exactly was on the phone? She asked, voice calm but stretched thin. David's jaw flexed as he set his coffee down with an unnecessary force. An old associate. You wouldn't know him. That's the thing, Anna replied, her tone sharpened by suspicion. I don't know him, and I'm starting to wonder what else you think I don't need to know. Before David could answer, the dog outside began barking wildly, its low growl cutting through the storm like a warning. Anna moved to the window and caught sight of something in the tree line. A shadow. No, two shadows. They weren't moving like lost hikers. They were waiting. Watching. David, she whispered, we're not alone. He didn't even look out the window. Instead, he walked to the corner of the room, pulled aside a woven rug, and pried open a trapdoor Anna hadn't noticed before. The stale scent of earth rose from below. You're going to have to trust me, he said, voice low. We need to go down there. Now. Her pulse thudded in her ears. And if I don't, then you'll meet them before I can explain. A loud crack sounded from outside. Not thunder, but the brittle snap of a branch under deliberate weight. The shadows in the trees shifted closer. Anna hesitated for a heartbeat, torn between the urge to run and the need to know what David was hiding. But the storm's howl and the growing presence beyond the cabin left her with little choice. She descended first, the rickety wooden ladder creaking under her weight. The trapdoor slammed shut above her, throwing them into darkness. A match flared, and the dim light revealed stone walls lined with old shelves, boxes, and, disturbingly, maps covered in red markings. One map in particular caught her eye, their current location circled in black ink, and around it, smaller red X's forming a perimeter. David blew out the match, plunging them back into shadow. If they've already found us, he murmured, it means someone betrayed me again. From above, the sound of boots thudded onto the cabin's porch. Then, 3 slow knocks. The following morning, I woke up with a heaviness I couldn't shake. The sunlight poured through the curtains, warm and golden, but it felt like a lie, like the world was pretending nothing had changed while the ground beneath me had already shifted. I opened my laptop to check the encrypted documents Noah had sent the night before. The files were massive, layered with cross-references, dates, and obscure corporate terms. At first, it looked like meaningless noise, just dry financial ledgers and obscure meeting minutes. But then I saw it. A single name buried in an export log. V. Rain, proxy authorization. Rain. I knew that name. She'd been a quiet figure in the background of my old projects. A legal consultant who rarely spoke in meetings, but always seemed to be present when sensitive issues arose. She wasn't just an employee. She had connections to powerful investors and was rumored to be the one who handled problems discreetly. And she'd signed off on the transfer of an entire data repository, the same one I thought had been archived and locked under my credentials, just 2 weeks before I was forced out. Noah's voice startled me from my thoughts. He'd let himself in with the spare key, holding a takeaway cup of coffee like it was a peace offering. You're not going to like what I found, he said, setting his bag on the table. I already don't like what I'm seeing, I replied, turning the laptop toward him. V. Rain. Ring a bell. He nodded grimly. More than a bell. That's Veronica Rain. She's the one who signs the contracts no one else wants their names on. If she's involved, it's because someone above her wants plausible deniability. That's when the buzzer rang. Once. Twice. A sharp, impatient rhythm. I froze. Noah moved to the window, peeking out through the blinds. "It's her," he whispered. "Veronica?" I asked. "No. Sophia." My stomach sank. Sophia had been my mentee years ago, fresh out of college, wide-eyed and eager. I taught her how to navigate office politics, how to push back against impossible deadlines, how to never let anyone rewrite her code without a fight. She'd been like a younger sister to me. When I opened the door, she was standing there in a sharp blazer, holding a slim leather folder. She smiled, warm, familiar, and yet something in her eyes felt off. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Privately." I glanced at Noah, who shrugged but didn't leave. We sat in the living room, and she placed a folder on the table between us like it was a bomb waiting to be armed. "I'm here because I owe you," she began. "But I need you to know, if you keep digging, you're going to end up worse than just unemployed." I leaned back. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a warning," she said. "Veronica isn't just moving stolen data. She's cleaning the trail. And she's not working alone. The people she answers to, they've done this before to bigger players than you. Those people don't just lose their jobs. They disappear." Noah laughed bitterly. "Classic scare tactic. Try harder." Sophia's eyes darted to him, then back to me. "You think I'm exaggerating?" Last year, a project lead in Singapore started asking questions about an asset transfer. He never made it to his meeting with the auditors. His body was found 3 weeks later in Manila. The room felt colder. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia or corporate legend, but the way she said it, quietly, without embellishment, felt too real. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. A text. "Check your email. You're already on the list." I didn't recognize the sender. I opened my inbox, and there it was, an untraceable email with a single attachment. A surveillance photo of me leaving the office the day I was fired. Only, it wasn't the office entrance. The background was wrong. It was a side alley, and I wasn't alone. Standing next to me in the photo was someone I didn't remember ever meeting. The storm that had rolled in overnight was still pounding the mansion with rain and wind. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the dripping windows and casting jagged shadows across the grand hall. Inside, the air was thick with tension. We had reached the point of no return. Oliver stood at the base of the spiral staircase, his face pale but determined. Beside him, Clara clutched the bundle of papers we had salvaged from the secret study. The truth was there, in coded letters, property transfers, and photographs that linked the Lancaster family fortune to a string of mysterious disappearances spanning 3 decades. But there was one problem: a locked door. Not just any door. The red door, tucked away behind the east corridor, which according to Clara's grandmother had never been opened in her lifetime. Every clue, every thread of this twisted puzzle pointed to whatever lay behind it. And tonight, with the storm hiding us from outside eyes, we had the key. "You know," Oliver said, sliding the heavy brass key from his coat pocket, "once we open this, there's no going back. People have died over these secrets." I met his gaze. People we loved. People who trusted us. I'm not stopping now. The lock gave way with a reluctant click, and the door swung inward to reveal stairs. Narrow, winding, and descending into darkness. The smell that rose up was damp, old, like earth and rust. We descended, lanterns in hand, every creak of the wood beneath our feet echoing like a warning. At the bottom, the cellar was vast, lined with dusty shelves and crates. But what stopped us cold was the far wall, a wall of glass panels, each one framing a display like a macabre museum. Inside them were artifacts, personal belongings of the missing. A gold locket, a child's wooden horse, a wedding veil, stained brown at the edges. Clara covered her mouth. They kept trophies, but there was more. In the center of the room stood a single steel cabinet, bolted to the floor. I pried it open, expecting more grim relics. Instead, I found stacks of ledger books, detailing financial transactions. Money laundered, assets seized, debts erased. The Lancaster fortune wasn't just dirty. It was built entirely on the suffering of others. And at the bottom of the cabinet lay a black leather-bound journal with one word embossed in gold: inheritance. I flipped it open, and my blood ran cold. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my father's. The journal detailed not only his involvement in the Lancaster schemes, but also a plan, our plan, that had been in motion since before I was even born. I wasn't an outsider who stumbled into this. I was meant to be the successor. The sound of slow clapping broke the silence. From the shadows stepped Evelyn Lancaster, the family matriarch, her silver hair glinting in the lantern light. "I knew you'd find it," she said smoothly. "It's in your blood. You can run from a name, but you can't run from what you are." "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm nothing like you." Her smile faltered. We left the mansion before dawn, carrying the ledgers, photographs, and the journal. By noon, the files were in the hands of the authorities, and the Lancaster empire began to crumble. Evelyn was arrested. Others fled, and the missing finally had justice. But I kept one thing: the journal. Not because I wanted to remember the blood-stained legacy, but because I needed to understand it, to make sure I never repeated it. In the end, the red door didn't just hide the family's darkest secret. It revealed mine. And now, I'm the one holding the key.